The first time Alina Reyes, my ex's older sister and Saint Orla's untouchable tennis queen, put her hands on my waist, I was supposed to be learning how to hold a forehand without humiliating myself. That was what she said anyway. Her voice carried across the indoor court in that low, controlled way she used when people were watching, smooth enough to make every instruction sound like a dare. The skylights above us were black with rain. The court beneath my shoes was freshly polished, and the whole training hall smelled like new tennis balls, warm rubber, and the lavender lotion she always rubbed into her wrists when she was nervous. I knew that detail because I had kissed those wrists in the supply corridor behind Studio C 2 nights before, when she had caught me crying over a ruined model and had kissed me so carefully I had believed, foolishly, that carefulness meant courage. Now half our design cohort sat along the bleachers with sketchboards across their knees, pretending to study gesture lines for our movement installation, while really watching my ex's sister teach her scholarship rival to hit a forehand. Alina stood behind me at the baseline, close enough that her breath touched the loose hair at the back of my neck. "Turn your shoulder," she said. "I am." "No, you're performing confidence. That's different." My mouth went dry, which was ridiculous when every water bottle in the place sweated beside the benches. "You would know." Her fingers tightened just once at my waist, not hard, not claiming, but enough to remind me she still knew exactly where I carried fear. "Yes," she said quietly, so only I heard. I would. 3 hours before that, she had pretended not to know me in the north hallway. That was the part nobody in the training hall understood. To everyone else, Alina and I were the polished rivalry the Institute liked to put on donor brochures, the elegant legacy student with medals, money, and a last name carved into one wing of the library, against the stubborn grant student from a town nobody at Saint Orla could find on a map without zooming in. What made it more poisonous was the part nobody said out loud. Talia was not only one of Alina's friends. She was Alina's younger sister, my ex, the girl who had once promised she loved my quiet, before deciding my quiet made me easy to leave. When she left me for Bryn after spring critique, she kept the room, and I kept the embarrassment. Alina had been the last person I should have trusted after that, which was exactly why trusting her had felt less like a choice and more like a fall. We competed for the same graduate showcase slot. We argued over material ethics in seminar. We corrected each other's calculations in fabrication lab with the kind of precision that made classmates lean closer. If anyone saw Alina looking at me too long, they called it rivalry. If anyone saw me waiting after critique until her friends were gone, they called it strategy. It had been convenient at first. Rivalry gave us cover. It let her stand too close while pretending to challenge my measurements. It let me send her midnight photos of failed casts with the caption, "Your empire is safe for one more day," and receive back, "Come downstairs, coward," with a coffee waiting in the dark courtyard. It had begun when Alina, after seeing Talia and Bryn laugh over my failed committee pairing, offered to teach me tennis with the bluntness of someone presenting a dare as a favor. I had accepted because I hated owing her anything, and hated more how badly I wanted to stand across a net from someone who did not look away from me. It let us become something without naming it, and I had let that happen because I wanted her enough to accept crumbs and call them a meal. That morning, the hallway had been crowded with visiting trustees, program mentors, and a group of final-year fellows in clean black jackets who had come to look at our proposals for the annual Courtlight exhibition. I had spent the whole night in the studio repairing a set of translucent panels after one of my suspension frames cracked. Alina had stayed until dawn, sitting on the floor in her expensive cream sweater, separating glass beads by size with the patience of someone who could have paid 10 people to do it, but wanted me to know she had chosen to be there. When I had fallen asleep against the wall around 4, she had covered me with her scarf. When I woke, there had been a paper cup beside my hand and a note in her slanted handwriting, "Eat before you become unbearable." A tiny crescent moon was drawn under the words. Private Alina did things like that. Public Alina let people believe I irritated her, so she would never have to explain why my coffee order sat in her phone. I found her outside the gallery review room with her usual circle around her. Talia Reyes from Fashion Systems, Alina's younger sister and my ex from the previous spring, Bryn from Architectural Lighting, and Sienna, who laughed like everything she said was already agreed upon by better people. Alina was smiling in that practiced way that made strangers want to be approved by her. Her hair was still damp from the rain, pinned back with a silver clip, and the scarf she had wrapped around me at dawn was folded over her arm. I saw it before I saw her eyes. Something foolish and warm lifted inside me. I stepped toward her, half forgetting the trustees and her friends, and the old caution that had trained itself into my bones. "Alina," I said, too softly at first. She heard me. I knew she heard me because her fingers closed on the scarf. I also knew in the same instant that she was going to fail me. Bryn followed her gaze. "Is she talking to you?" The words were casual, but the question had teeth. Sienna looked from me to Alina and smiled like she had just found a hidden seam in a dress. "Do you two know each other outside of trying to destroy each other in critique?" It would have been so easy. She did not have to call me her girlfriend. I was not asking her to hand strangers the softest parts of us in the north hallway under fluorescent lights. She could have said we worked together. She could have said we were in the same cohort. She could have said my name. Instead, Alina's public face settled over the woman who had pressed a kiss behind my ear at dawn and whispered, "After the showcase, I'll stop being afraid." She glanced at me as if I were a student worker asking for directions. "I'm sorry," she said, clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Were you looking for someone?" For 1 second, I thought the tile had shifted beneath my shoes. Nobody gasped. That would have been kinder, maybe. The cruelty of the moment was how neat it was, how socially acceptable. Talia laughed once, a light little sound. "Oh, brutal. She really doesn't know anyone before noon." Sienna's smile sharpened. A trustee with pearl earrings stepped around me without apology. I held the portfolio tube against my chest and understood with humiliating clarity that if I reacted, I would become the unstable one. If I cried, I would become the girl who imagined intimacy with the most admired woman in our program. If I argued, Alina could hide behind confusion, so I did the only thing pride allowed. I looked at the scarf over her arm. I looked at her mouth, which had gone pale at the edges. Then I nodded as if I had made a mistake. "Sorry," I said. "Wrong person." I walked away before she could repair it in private. That was new. Until then, I had always let her repair things in private. A thumb stroking the inside of my wrist under a library table. A message waiting after she laughed too loudly at someone else's joke. A kiss against the studio door after she had ignored me for an entire reception. I had collected those repairs like evidence that the damage did not matter. But something in me had become too tired to keep balancing the ledger. I went to the fabrication lab, locked myself in the resin closet, and stood among sealed containers until the smell made my eyes water for reasons I could blame on chemicals. My phone vibrated 11 times. I did not look. At noon, I washed my face, tied my hair back, and went to seminar because the world did not stop for private heartbreak, pretending to be professional rivalry. Saint Orla Institute occupied an old athletics complex near the river. All stone arches, glass additions, and restored courts and studios for movement, sculpture, and environmental design. It was the kind of place that made suffering look curated. Rich students called it atmospheric. Scholarship students called it cold. I had worked 2 jobs to afford what my grant did not cover, and I had learned to move through the campus like someone borrowing space rather than belonging to it. Alina belonged everywhere. Professors remembered her mother's endowment before they remembered her project titles. First years stepped out of her path and then pretended they had not. She was brilliant, which made resenting her inconvenient. She could look at a room and understand how power moved through it. She could build a kinetic installation from steel thread and reclaimed mirror that made critics lower their voices. She could also, apparently, look at me after months of kissing me and turn me into a stranger because 3 friends and a trustee were nearby. I lasted through seminar by taking notes I never reread. Professor Ivers assigned partners for the court-based movement study, an exercise meant to help us design installations responsive to human balance, anticipation, and fear. Everyone paired quickly because everyone had already made quiet agreements. I was still closing my notebook when I realized the room had sorted itself around me. Sienna had taken Bryn. Talia had waved to Alina with theatrical loyalty. Even Nomi Park, a documentary fellow with a shaved undercut and a way of listening that made people confess before they meant to, had been claimed by a lighting student. The only name left on Professor Ivor's clipboard was mine. Heat crawled up my neck. Being unchosen in a graduate seminar should not have hurt after the north hallway, but humiliation had a talent for finding fresh doors. Then Alina stood. Her chair scraped back. Conversation thinned without stopping. She crossed the room. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with the kind of focus that made people get quiet after all. She stopped beside my table and held out a hand as if we were discussing work, and not wreckage. "I'll partner with Liora." That was my name, spoken in public. Too late, my heart said. Still, hearing it from her mouth after the hallway felt like feeling a pulse in something I had decided was dead. Talia blinked. "You already said you'd work with me." Alina did not look at her. "I changed my mind." Professor Ivers lifted an eyebrow, made a mark on the clipboard, and moved on. I looked at Alina's hand, then at her face. She looked calm to everyone else. I could see the smallest fracture near her jaw. I picked up my notebook without touching her. "You don't have to make a scene," I said under my breath, as we followed the others toward the court wing. "I'm not. You crossed the room in front of everyone after pretending I didn't exist." Her step faltered once, so briefly only someone who had learned her rhythms would notice. "I know what I did. Do you?" I asked. "Or do you know that you feel bad now?" The words came out quiet, not sharp, which made them worse. She opened her mouth, then closed it because Bryn had turned around. Public Alina returned like a locked door. "We should focus on the exercise," she said. I almost laughed. The sound would have been ugly, so I swallowed it. "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't want anyone to think we were discussing something personal." At the court, the class changed into training clothes behind frosted glass stalls and emerged with borrowed rackets, wristbands, and the particular self-consciousness of artists asked to do anything athletic in front of one another. I hated the racket before I held it properly. I could return a slow ball if luck felt generous, but a forehand required the kind of surrender my body considered suspicious. Weight forward, shoulder open, wrist loose, trust the swing before knowing where the ball would go. Alina moved across the court as if the lines rearranged themselves for her. She had been captain of some private school tennis team before Saint Orla, naturally, because even her extracurriculars sounded expensive. When she walked toward me with a basket of balls under one arm, the others watched with open curiosity. The rivalry angle amused them. Two top candidates forced into a trust exercise after months of slicing each other apart in critique. If they noticed the tension under it, they translated it into competition. That was what hiding did. It made liars of witnesses. "Put your shoulders back," Alina said, standing close enough that the frame of her racket brushed mine. "You're trying to hit with your apology instead of your body. Apologies have served me well. Not on a court. Maybe I don't trust courts." Her eyes flicked to mine. "Maybe you shouldn't trust anything that changes rules depending on who is watching." It was the first honest thing she had said all day, and I hated that my body understood her, before my pride could reject it. She lifted her hands, palms open. "I won't force the correction. That's not the same as giving me a reason to trust you." A muscle moved in her cheek. "No," she lowered her voice. "It isn't." The exercise required one partner to stand behind the other, adjust the grip, and guide the waist only until the hitting partner found balance. Around us, classmates laughed and sent practice balls rattling into the curtain. Professor Ivers called reminders about consent and pressure points. Alina waited. That mattered, and did not matter. "Say stop, and I stop," she said. "Say let go, and I let go. You didn't give me that choice this morning." Her hands lowered slightly at the baseline, still not touching me. "I know. Don't say it, like confession fixes it. It doesn't." The honesty landed heavily because it had nothing to decorate itself with. I hated that I could tell she was trying not to reach for me. I hated more that part of me wanted her to. I turned my back to her because the exercise required it, not because I had forgiven anything. Her fingers came first to the racket handle, careful over mine, then to my waist with a gentleness that made anger harder to hold cleanly. She adjusted my grip by a fraction. Her knuckles brushed my thumb. My stance shifted under her guidance, left foot angled, right foot braced, hips turned toward the net. The court did not move beneath me, but I felt unsteady anyway. "Loosen here," she said. "Don't command me." "I'm not commanding. I'm asking your hand to stop trying to strangle the racket." Despite myself, a tiny sound escaped me, almost a laugh. Her thumbs stilled against the fabric at my side as if the sound hurt her. "There," she said. "You do remember how to hit. How to laugh at me. You make it easy. I used to." The past tense moved through us like a cold draft across the court. She fed the first ball gently, almost insultingly slow. I swung too late and sent it into the net. The second skidded off the frame and made Bryn duck. The third met the strings with a clean, bright pop and crossed the net in a low arc that landed inside the service box. It was not impressive. It felt miraculous. "Again," Alina said, but her voice had softened. Then Talia called from the opposite baseline. "Careful, Reyes. If you stand behind her any longer, people will think you've gone soft." Laughter skipped across the court. My body jerked. The next ball flew sideways toward the curtain. Alina's hand caught my waist before I stumbled back over the line, fast and instinctive. For one breath, we were too close to be explained by coursework. Her face hovered near mine, no public mask in place. "Are you okay?" she asked. Not elegant, not smooth, frightened. I could have lived on that voice once. I stepped forward until her arm fell away. "I'm fine." She turned to Talia. "Do that again, and you can explain to Ivers why you're leaving the exercise." The court quieted. Talia's mouth opened, then shut. Alina did not raise her voice. She did not have to. Everyone remembered then that popularity was not softness, that Alina's charm had always been edged with authority. It should have felt satisfying to be defended. Instead, it made my chest ache with a new kind of resentment. She could do it. She could choose me in public when fear for my body cut through her pride. She simply had not chosen me when all that was at risk was her image. After class, she followed me into the corridor where the old athletic club tiles held the day's humidity. "Liora!" I kept walking. "I have work. Please." That stopped me more than I wanted it to. Alina Reyes did not say please where people could hear. A first-year carrying towels glanced between us, then hurried on. I folded my damp robe tighter. "You get 2 minutes. I panicked this morning." "No, you calculated." She flinched. "Good," I thought, and then hated myself for needing evidence she could hurt. "They were watching," she said. "The trustees, my friends, Talia. I was watching too." Her eyes closed for half a second. "I know." "Do you understand that you didn't just hide us? You made me look foolish for knowing you." "Yes." "No, Alina. You made me lie to protect your lie. You made me apologize for speaking to someone who kissed me 6 hours earlier." Her face changed at that. Not dramatically, but enough. "I didn't think of it like that. That's the problem." I shifted my bag on my shoulder. "You think of your fear in detail. You think of my pain in summary. She drew in a breath and looked down the hall, where 2 students had slowed near the lockers. For a terrible second, I saw the old habit rise in her, the instinct to step back, to lower her voice, to protect the outline of herself from public speculation. Then she stayed where she was. "You're right," she said, louder than comfort required. The 2 students stopped pretending not to listen. "I hurt you because I was afraid people would know I wanted you. That was cowardly." Hearing it did not heal me. It did something more dangerous. It made the wound visible. "Don't practice bravery on me after the damage," I said. "Go be brave somewhere it costs you something." I left before I softened. That became my first real act of self-preservation. Not the perfect speech. Not the dramatic exit. Just walking away while I still wanted to turn back. In the locker room, I checked my phone. There were 17 messages. Her name appeared again and again, each preview more stripped of control. "I'm outside the lab. I'm sorry. I know that isn't enough. Please eat." I know you hate when I say that. I deleted the thread without reading the rest, because I knew myself. If I let private Alina back into my palm too soon, she would become real enough to outweigh public Alina again, and I could not survive being loved in fragments. For the next week, I treated her like a colleague, not an enemy. Enemies took too much energy. I answered project questions in group meetings. I challenged her prototype notes when they were wrong. I thanked her once when she passed me a missing drill bit. I did not meet her in courtyards. I did not let her corner me in the stacks. When she waited by my studio door after midnight, I walked past her with my headphones on, and a playlist silent in my ears. The first 2 days, her friends watched with amused confusion. By the fourth, confusion became interest. By the sixth, Sienna asked in critique if I had finally conceded defeat in the Reyes March rivalry. I looked up from my notes. Not everything women do near each other is about winning, I said. Nomi Park, seated 2 rows behind me, made a small appreciative sound. Nomi had been easy to underestimate because she never tried to dominate a room. She documented things instead. Hands shaping clay, people hesitating before doors. The way a lie changed posture before it changed speech. Her film project that term explored witnessing as care, which sounded pretentious until she showed 10 minutes of footage and made half the seminar cry without using music. She began appearing near my work table with practical excuses. Did I know where the archival clamps were? Could she film the water reflections on my glass panels? Did I want the sandwich she had bought by accident, because apparently the cafe considered mustard a personality? She did not ask about Alina at first. That was part of why I let her sit beside me. You look like you're sleeping in 20-minute installments, she said one evening in the old pump room, where I was hanging test panels from rusted hooks. That obvious? Only to people with eyes. She held up a paper bag. Soup. The kind with actual vegetables, not vending machine optimism. You feed all your documentary subjects? Only the ones who look like they might bite me for caring. I took the bag, because hunger had begun making my hands unreliable. Nomi watched me tie off a suspension line. Your piece changed, she said. It used to look like water holding light. Now it looks like light trying to get out. I glanced at her. That's either very insightful, or you're flirting using critique language. She grinned, quick and warm. Both can be true. I did not tell Alina about that conversation because I was not telling Alina anything. Still, she noticed. Of course she noticed. Alina noticed when a professor changed pen colors. She noticed when my left shoulder rose because I had skipped lunch. She noticed Nomi leaning against my table with her sleeves rolled up, laughing at something I said. Watching her notice was like watching a storm decide whether to become weather. She did not interrupt. That mattered, though not as much as it would have before. She simply stood across the studio with a coil of copper mesh in her hands, her expression unreadable except for the little white mark, where her thumb pressed too hard into the wire. The lunch invitation happened on a Thursday, in the central atrium where everyone ate, because rain had driven the outdoor tables useless. The atrium had once been the athletic hall reception room. Now it held long wooden tables under hanging plants and a glass roof that made every conversation feel public. I sat with my sketchbook open beside a bowl of noodles, pretending to refine anchor points while actually enjoying Nomi's story about bribing a retired bus driver to appear in her film. She spoke with her whole face, not loudly, but with a looseness that made the space around her feel easier. Across the atrium, Alina sat with Talia, Bryn, and 2 trustees' interns. She had positioned herself where she could see me without turning her head. I noticed because I was not immune, only wiser. Nomi reached over and tapped my sketchbook with the end of her chopsticks. There's a small exhibition at the River Warehouse tomorrow night. Student work, terrible wine, decent light. Come with me. The words were simple. No performance, no trap. I looked up, and she did not look away. As research? I asked. As a date, she said. Around us, the table continued for half a second, as if the air had not changed. Then Bryn, 2 tables away, went quiet, mid-sentence. Someone's fork touched ceramic too loudly. I felt Alina before I looked at her. She had gone still in the way predators and frightened people both do. Nomi did not glance toward her. That was important. She had not asked me out to create a scene. She asked because she wanted to, because I had become visible to someone while I was trying to disappear. My first impulse was panic, not because I disliked her, but because being wanted openly felt almost indecent after months of being hidden like contraband. You don't have to answer now, Nomi said, gentler. I know your life has weather. That's one word for it. I like weather. I film it badly, but I like it. I smiled before I could stop myself. That was when Alina stood. She did not march over. She collected her tray, said something to Talia, and crossed the atrium with public calm, arranged over private chaos. People watched, because people always watched Alina, but this time her attention made them follow its line to me. She stopped beside our table. Liora, she said. My name. Again. It no longer undid me. Can we talk? Nomi leaned back slightly, giving me room without retreating. I set my chopsticks down. I'm having lunch. After then. I have lab. Then before lab. Her control frayed at the edge of the last word. She heard it too. So did everyone within 3 tables. Talia had risen halfway from her chair. Nomi's eyes moved between us, sharp but not cruel. We were in the middle of something. Alina looked at her then. I had seen Alina destroy people in critique with less than that glance, but Nomi only lifted her eyebrows, unimpressed. I know, Alina said. That's why I'm here. The honesty was so bare the atrium seemed to lean toward it. My anger sparked. That is not a romantic answer, I said. That is a selfish one. Color rose along Alina's cheekbones. I know. Do you? My voice stayed low, but people were listening. I let them. Because when I wanted to speak to you in public, you didn't know me. Now someone else asked me for one evening and suddenly you can cross an atrium. Her mouth parted. No defense came. That, more than anything, frightened me. I had prepared for excuses. I had not prepared for her to have none. Talia appeared behind her like loyalty, weaponized. Alina, don't do this here. Alina did not turn around. I've done enough things here for the wrong reasons. A murmur moved through nearby tables. Sienna whispered something I did not catch. Alina placed her tray on the end of our table with hands that were almost steady. Nomi, I'm sorry for interrupting. Nomi nodded once. Accepted if you stop doing it. Something like surprise flickered across Alina's face. Then she looked at me. I don't have the right to ask you not to go. No, I said. You don't. The words landed between us like a boundary drawn in ink. But I need you to know that seeing someone else choose you openly made me understand exactly what I refused to do. That sounds like something you should have understood before it hurt you. Yes. Her voice lowered. It should have. I could feel every gaze around us, but for once, the publicness did not belong only to her fear. It belonged to my refusal too. I picked up my water glass and took a sip because my mouth had gone dry. I'm going to think about the date, I said to Nomi, because she deserved an answer not shaped around Alina's panic. Nomi's expression softened. Fair. I turned back to Alina. And I'm going to lab. Alone. She accepted that with a small nod. Then she did something that cost her more than a dramatic declaration would have. She turned to the room she had spent years mastering and let them see her lose. I treated Liora like a stranger last week because I was afraid of what people would think, she said, not loudly, but in the caring voice she used during presentations. That was my failure, not hers. If anyone repeats a version that makes her look foolish, correct it. The atrium went so quiet, I heard rain strike the glass roof. Talia's face drained of its easy amusement. Bryn looked fascinated in the worst way. Nomi watched me, not Alina, as if checking whether the public confession felt like pressure. It did, and did not. I wanted to be grateful. I wanted to be furious that she had found courage only after jealousy put a match to her fear. Both feelings fit inside me without canceling each other. I stood, closed my sketchbook, and slung my bag over my shoulder. Thank you for correcting the rumor, I said to Alina. That doesn't repair us. I know, she whispered. It was the second time that day she said it, and this time I believe she did. Rumors began by sunset anyway, because correction was not control. Some people said Alina and I had been secretly sleeping together, which made intimacy sound cheap, and conveniently erased the months of gentleness that had preceded any kiss. Some said I had manipulated her. Some said Nomi had done it deliberately to embarrass the program's golden girl. Saint Orla loved art about vulnerability and punished actual vulnerable people for being untidy. Professor Ivers asked me into her office the next morning, not to discipline me, but to warn me that donor weekend would intensify everything. "You are not required to disclose your private life," she said, sitting beneath a wall of framed exhibition posters. "But if public tension affects the collaborative review, the committee will ask questions." I almost laughed. It already affected review when Alina denied knowing me. Ivers looked at me over her glasses. Yes, I told her the same thing. That mattered. Consequences had reached rooms I did not enter. Alina's cowardice was no longer a private injury she could soothe with apology. It had become professional risk. When I left Ivers's office, Alina was waiting by the stairwell, not blocking my path. Her hair was loose for once, rain dark at the ends. "I met with Ivers," she said. She told me. I asked to withdraw from the showcase selection committee. That stopped me. Alina was the student liaison, the one whose family name made donors attend rehearsals. The role did not guarantee her the top slot, but it placed her at the center of every important conversation. Why? Because after what I did, I shouldn't have influence over a process you're part of. That will make people talk more. Probably. And your mother? Her mouth tightened. There it was, the old pressure. She called twice. And I didn't answer before class. I'm answering after. She looked at the stairwell window rather than at me. Not bravely, maybe. But I'm answering. I did not forgive her then. I did, however, stop pretending nothing she did mattered. "I'm going to the warehouse exhibition with Nomi tonight," I said. Alina's fingers curled once against the strap of her bag. She breathed through it. "Thank you for telling me. I'm not asking permission." "I know. Are you going to punish me with distance and then call it respect?" That drew her eyes back. "No. I'm going to hate it quietly and deserve the discomfort." Against my will, my lips nearly moved. She noticed and looked devastated by the almost smile. "Have fun," she said. The words sounded like broken glass wrapped in cloth. I mean that badly, but I mean it. I walked away before kindness complicated the shape of my resolve. Nomi was not a consolation prize. I reminded myself of that while dressing for the warehouse. She deserved better than being the room I entered to escape another. So when she met me outside the river building in a rust-colored coat and boots, scuffed from actual use, I told her the truth before we went inside. I'm not over someone. Nomi looked at the rain sliding down the awning. I gathered. I don't want to use you to prove I can be wanted. Good. I'm very charming, but I'm not a self-esteem workshop. I laughed, startled into it. I'm serious. So am I. She faced me then, her expression open but not soft enough to be foolish. I asked you because I like the way you look at things before deciding what they are. I also like that you can admit complicated truths before buying terrible wine with me. We can call tonight a date with an asterisk. What does that mean? It means I won't pretend I have no interest, and you won't pretend you're free in a way you're not. We see the exhibition. We talk. Nobody lies. It was almost embarrassingly restful, spending an evening with someone who did not require translation. Nomi introduced me to 2 filmmakers, asked sharp questions about projection mapping, and bought a paper cup of wine so awful, we abandoned it on a windowsill, like evidence of a crime. She made me describe my court light piece without apologizing for ambition. When I stumbled over the scale, she said, "No, say that again, like you believe you deserve the room." So I did. By the end of the night, I realized something important and inconvenient. I could have chosen Nomi in another life, not as revenge, not as proof, but because she was clever, kind without being bland, and unafraid to be seen wanting. The fact that my heart still turned toward Alina did not make Nomi lesser. It made my decision heavier. Outside, under the warehouse awning, Nomi tucked her hands into her coat pockets. "Can I kiss you?" she asked. The question was so clean, it hurt. I thought of Alina's mouth in the supply corridor, Alina's denial in the hallway, Alina's hands at my waist in the court. I thought of the version of me who would have said yes to avoid seeming damaged. I shook my head slowly. I want to be able to say yes without using the kiss to run from something. Nomi nodded, disappointed but not insulted. That is irritatingly healthy. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for not making me collateral. She bumped my shoulder with hers. Let me walk you to the tram as a person with excellent boundaries and mild romantic frustration. I smiled. I can live with that. When I got home to my tiny rented room above a closed bakery, there was a message from Alina. Not 17. 1. I told my mother. No punctuation after it, as if adding a period would make it too final. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, coat still on, and stared at those 4 words. Then another message arrived. She said I was reckless. She said I was risking my place here. She asked if you pressured me. I told her the truth. I pressured you to disappear, and you finally stopped letting me. I am not proud. I am trying to become someone who can be. I did not answer. I put the phone face down and cried for a long time. Not because everything was fixed, but because she had taken the fight to the place where fear had roots. The next week changed the shape of campus. Alina's mother, Liora Reyes, arrived for donor weekend in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first year of rent. She moved through Saint Orla with the serene entitlement of someone who had funded enough walls to believe she owned the air between them. I saw her first across the old library, standing beside Alina under a portrait of the Institute founder. Alina looked younger beside her, not visibly intimidated, but refined into stillness. Lenora's gaze passed over me, returned, and sharpened with recognition. I expected Alina to look away. She did not. She said something to her mother, then crossed the library toward me while half the donor committee pretended to examine catalogs. Liora, she said, my mother would like to meet you. The sentence was ordinary. The act was not. I could see the cost in the small tension around her mouth. Would she? No, Alina said, but I told her she should. Despite everything, I almost smiled. That sounds promising. It isn't, but it's honest. She held out no hand. She did not presume. The choice sat with me, visible. I could refuse and everyone would know she had offered. I could accept and everyone would watch. I closed the book I had not been reading. 5 minutes, I said. We walked back together without touching. Liora Reyes had Alina's eyes without Alina's warmth. Miss March, she said, your glasswork has attracted attention. So has your daughter's public behavior, apparently. A donor nearby choked delicately into her tea. Alina's head turned toward me, not in warning, more like awe and terror. Lenora smiled. Directness is fashionable in young artists, only when patrons find it charming. Do you expect me to find you charming? No. I looked at Alina, then back. I expect you to understand that your daughter and I are both adults. Whatever she chooses to say about me, publicly or privately, should belong to her, not to your donor strategy. Lenora's smile thinned. You speak as though you know our family. I speak as someone who has been treated like a liability by people protecting reputations that were never mine to maintain. Alina inhaled once, then stepped beside me, not in front. Beside. Mother, I'm in love with Liora. The library did not explode. No violins swelled. A student dropped a book somewhere in the stacks. Lenora's face did nothing for 2 seconds, which told me everything. This is neither the time nor the place. Alina's voice shook at the beginning and steadied by the end. That is what I kept telling myself until I used timing as an excuse to hurt her. I'm not asking for approval during donor weekend. I'm informing you because hiding made me cruel, and I'm done mistaking cruelty for discretion. People were absolutely listening now. I felt the attention like heat, but for once it was not burning only me. Lenora looked at me as if I had reached into her daughter and rearranged expensive machinery. And you, Miss March? Are you in love with my daughter? There it was, the trap of public declaration, as demand. Alina turned her head quickly. She doesn't owe you an answer. The words came before I could defend myself. That, more than the confession, changed something. Alina had not dragged me into her bravery and called it proof. She had left the door open. I looked at Lenora. I loved the version of her who was kind when no one watched, I said. I'm deciding whether I can trust the version learning to be honest when everyone does. Alina's eyes shone, but she did not reach for me. Lenora's gaze moved between us, measuring the lack of performance. How inconvenient, she said at last. Then she turned to a donor and resumed discussing archival tiles as if no earthquake had occurred. After that, nobody could pretend not to know there was something between us. Some people were kinder once gossip became official enough to bore them. Others became worse. Talia cornered me in the material library 2 days later, smelling like expensive citrus and resentment. "You must be thrilled," she said. "All that martyr patience finally paid off." I slid a drawer of textile samples shut. "I'm busy." Alina loves difficult things until they stop making her feel profound. I turned then, tired of letting other people deliver warnings disguised as concern. "Is that why you liked being near her?" Her face changed. There was the motive, not villainous, not noble. Talia had built part of herself on reflected light, and hated that I had seen the shadow. "You think she'll choose you when it actually costs her?" "I don't know," I said. But I know I'm not arranging my life around your fear of losing influence." Alina appeared at the end of the aisle. She had heard enough. I saw it in her face. Old Alina would have sliced Talia apart for speaking to me that way. New Alina did something harder. "Talia," she said, "I let you make jokes about Liora because it helped me pretend I wasn't the one hurting her. That was unfair to her and to you." Talia looked wounded in a way that almost made her young. "So now I'm the villain?" "No," Alina said. "You're responsible for what you say next." Talia's mouth trembled with anger. Then she walked away without saying it. Alina stayed where she was. "Was that enough space?" she asked. "You waited until I answered for myself." "I'm learning." "Good." I picked up my samples. "Keep doing that when I'm not there to grade you." Our first real conversation after the public confession happened not in a hallway or courtyard, but in the conservation studio during a power outage. A summer storm knocked out half the campus grid, trapping several of us with emergency lamps and unfinished exhibition pieces. By 9, most people had gone home. I stayed because my glass panels needed stabilizing before the humidity shifted. Alina stayed on the opposite side of the room, repairing a motor assembly with a flashlight between her teeth. We worked without speaking for almost an hour. It should have been awkward. It was, but usefully so. Silence with a task inside it felt different from silence used as avoidance. When the rain intensified, she looked over. "Your left anchor is taking too much weight." I checked. She was right. "I hate that you noticed." I considered pretending not to. I gave her a look. She winced. "Bad phrasing." "Terrible." A small laugh moved through the room and left us both startled. She set down the motor. "Can I help?" I wanted to say no on principle. The cable creaked. Principle did not outrank physics. "Hold the frame. Don't adjust anything unless I ask." She came over and braced the panel exactly where I indicated. We stood close, hands inches apart on the suspended glass, lamplight turning her face gold at the edges. "I miss you," she said, not as a weapon, not as a request. A fact placed carefully on the table. "I miss who I thought I was with you," I said. The words hurt her. I saw it, and for once I did not rush to soften them. "I miss being unafraid in private, but I don't miss waiting for doors to close before you became tender." She nodded. "I use privacy like a room where consequences couldn't enter. And I helped build it." Her eyes lifted. "You were trying to protect something you loved. I was trying to be chosen, without asking to be." The frame stabilized under our hands. Rain filled the windows with moving silver. "Nomi asked if she could kiss me," I said. Alina went very still, but she did not interrupt. I said no. Not because of you exactly. Because I didn't want to turn her into an answer to a question you left open. "She seems kind." "She is." "And interested." "Yes." A hard breath left Alina. "Thank you for telling me." "I'm telling you because honesty should not only start when it benefits us." She looked down at her hands on the frame. "I don't want to be rewarded for jealousy." "Good." "I don't want you back because I finally performed public courage under pressure." Better. She stopped, frustrated with language for once. I want to become consistent enough that you don't have to wonder which version of me will arrive. That sentence entered me quietly, and stayed. I tied off the last cable. That will take time. I know. And during that time, I get to have a life that isn't just waiting for your growth. Pain crossed her face, but she nodded. Yes. I stepped back from the panel. Then start there. Starting there looked less dramatic than I expected. It looked like Alina not waiting outside my apartment, even though she knew the tram stop I used. It looked like her sending one message before a critique instead of 10 after it. I found a source on responsive buoyancy that might help your anchor problem. Use it or ignore it. It looked like me using it, because it was useful, not because she had sent it, and writing back only, thanks. It looked like 3 full days where we spoke about materials, weight distribution, and the committee's revised schedule without turning every exchange into a wound inspection. I had believed healing would feel like a series of grand emotional decisions. Instead, it came in small professional courtesies that let my nervous system stop expecting ambush. When she handed me a caliper in fabrication lab and did not brush my fingers, I understood she was choosing restraint. When I asked her to review a stress point, and she said, "Do you want my opinion or just an extra pair of hands?" I understood she was learning consent in places no one wrote poems about. The harder tests came during the rehearsal presentation for donor walkthroughs. Each candidate had to stand beside their unfinished installation while small groups rotated through, asking questions with the bright cruelty of people who funded art, but preferred artists grateful and tidy. My panels were half-hung, their etched fractures catching light in uneven bursts, and I could feel every flaw like a bruise. Alina's work was in the adjoining room. Elegant, counterweighted steel reeds responding to breath. Students drifted between us, comparing without pretending not to. Sienna arrived with 2 donors and a smile polished for harm. "Liora's piece is emotionally compelling," she said, as if generosity had exhausted her, though the instability feels rather literal after recent events. The donors smiled uncertainly. Old me would have swallowed it. New me set down my wrench. "The instability is calculated," I said. "The panels move because stress redistributes through the frame. If you stand there, you'll see the fracture lines connect rather than separate." I pointed to the proper viewing mark. "It is not about collapse. It is about load finding honest paths." The donors stepped into place. The light shifted exactly as it should, turning the broken lines into one continuous river. One of them murmured, "Oh." That small sound steadied me more than applause. Sienna's smile thinned. Alina had been standing in her doorway, watching, but she did not rescue me. She did not need to. Only after the donors moved on did she come close enough to speak. That was better than anything I would have said. "I know." Her mouth curved. "Good." Then her expression changed. "May I add something? Artist to artist? You may attempt it. The 3rd panel is 0.5 centimeter too low. It makes the river sag." I stared at the installation, then at her. She was right. Again, I hated and loved that in equal measure. "Get the ladder," I said. She did, without looking triumphant. We fixed the panel together while Sienna pretended not to watch. The work required us to communicate quickly. Raise, hold, loosen, now. Alina climbed the ladder because she was taller, and I stood below, guiding the panel as it swung. For the first time since the hallway, our collaboration felt like the old rivalry. Before it had become a hiding place. Sharp, focused, almost joyful, because each of us trusted the other not to be mediocre. When the panel settled correctly, the whole piece changed. The river of cracks lifted into tension. Alina looked down at me from the ladder, hair falling loose from its clip. "There," she said. "Now it looks like it knows where it's going." The sentence could have carried too much metaphor. She let it remain about the work. That restraint made the metaphor more powerful, not less. Later that afternoon, Professor Ivers asked me to help lead a small workshop for visiting foundation students who wanted to see the court wing. I agreed before realizing Alina had been asked too. The group consisted of 7 undergraduates from partner schools, all adults, all bright-eyed and trying not to seem impressed by Saint Orla's arches. One of them asked how collaboration worked when two artists had competing instincts. I nearly said, badly, if one of them lies in hallways. Instead, I said, you need a shared definition of risk. If one person thinks risk means technical failure, and the other thinks risk means embarrassment, you'll design around different fears. Alina, standing beside the old diving blocks, looked at me. And you have to name which fear is actually controlling the project, she added. Otherwise you end up protecting the wrong thing. The students wrote that down as if it were neutral advice. I felt the words travel somewhere deeper. After the workshop, one of the students stayed behind to ask me about scholarship applications. Her name was Priya, and she reminded me painfully of myself at 21, holding ambition like something she had stolen. She asked whether Saint Orla was lonely if you came without money or connections. I could have lied the way brochures did. Sometimes, I said, but loneliness is not the same as proof you don't belong. She nodded too quickly. Alina, who had been coiling extension cords nearby, paused. I continued. Find the people who respect your work before they understand your background. And if someone makes you feel lucky to be tolerated, they're not offering mentorship. They're offering a leash. Priya wrote that down too. When she left, Alina remained bent over the cords for a moment longer than necessary. I'm sorry I made Saint Orla lonelier, she said. The apology did not ask to be answered. It simply entered the record. Nomi's film Rough Cut screened that Friday in the Black Box Theater, which smelled like dust, cables, and overheated projectors. I went because she asked, and because our new honesty deserved follow-through. Alina went because Nomi had invited her too, a decision I understood only when the lights dimmed. The film was not about scandal. It was about witnesses. Hands hovering before touching wet clay. A janitor pausing to straighten a fallen exhibition label. A dancer helping another retie a brace. My own hands appeared for 6 seconds, threading wire through glass. Then Alina's hands entered frame, not touching mine, holding the panel steady from the other side. The camera lingered on the space between us. Not absence, choice. In the darkness, I heard Alina inhale softly 2 seats away. Nomi had seen us more clearly than either of us had at the time. During the feedback discussion, a student asked Nomi if she believed observation changed the thing observed. Nomi leaned forward, elbows on knees. Always, she said. But pretending not to observe changes it too. Refusing to witness someone can be an action. The room accepted the answer academically. I felt Alina turn her head toward me. She did not speak. She did not need to. Afterward, in the lobby, Nomi handed me a flash drive. Your footage, in case it helps your documentation. Thank you. And before you ask, no, I didn't make you two look tragic on purpose. We handled that ourselves? With alarming dedication. Alina, standing close enough to hear, said, I deserved that. Nomi studied her for a second. You did, but you're less boring now. Alina blinked. I laughed so hard I had to cover my mouth. That night became the first time the three of us occupied the same conversation without jealousy steering it. We walked from the black box to the tram under a sky clearing after rain. Nomi talked about editing structure. Alina asked real questions instead of performing expertise. I listened to them discuss documentary ethics and realized jealousy had flattened my imagination. I had thought any connection between them would threaten me. Instead, their differences clarified my own choices. Nomi moved toward truth by inviting it into the room and seeing who stayed. Alina moved toward truth as if crossing ice, testing each step for cracks. I cared for them differently. One affection opened possibility. The other carried history, damage, repair, and a stubborn hope I had not managed to extinguish. Knowing the difference did not make me weak. It made me honest. When my tram arrived, Nomi hugged me first. Don't overwork tonight. Bossy. Documentary people are legally required to interfere. She left to catch the eastbound line, waving without lingering. Alina remained beside me on the platform. Her coat collar was turned up against the cold. She is good for you, she said. I watched Nomi disappear down the stairs. Yes. The old Alina would have asked if that meant something dangerous. This Alina only nodded. I'm glad. Are you? Not purely. The admission came with a crooked, self-mocking smile. But enough that the selfish part doesn't get the deciding vote. The tram doors opened. I stepped inside, then turned before they closed. That is the first jealous thing you've said that didn't make me want to run. Her smile faded into something tender. Progress? Progress, I said, and let the doors slide shut between us. The final rehearsal before donor night nearly ruined everything for reasons that had nothing to do with romance. A suspension motor in Alina's piece failed during a test cycle, sending one steel reed snapping sideways into a support column. No one was hurt, but the sound cracked through the gallery like a gunshot. Alina went perfectly still. The kind of still that meant panic had found its oldest room in her. Technicians rushed in. Halvern began speaking about insurance. Lenora, who had arrived early for a private preview, looked at the damaged piece and said, "This is why public instability is unwise." I saw Alina absorb the double meaning. Saw her almost become the daughter who would apologize for the inconvenience of having tried. My first instinct was to go to her. My second, stronger instinct was to ask whether my comfort would help or let her avoid standing. Alina looked across the room at me, not pleading, checking. I held her gaze for 1 second and gave the smallest nod toward the broken reed, not toward myself. Do the work. Her shoulders moved with one hard breath. She turned to Halvern. The motor failed because I approved a lighter bracket after the manufacturer delay. That was my decision. I can replace the bracket and rebalance the reed by morning, or I can withdraw the piece if the committee decides the risk is unacceptable, but I won't pretend the failure came from the concept. Halvern seemed startled by the absence of deflection. Lenora looked displeased in a way that suggested displeasure was also respect wearing hostile clothes. The technicians assessed the damage. Alina rolled up her sleeves. I did not touch her until 2 hours later, when the gallery had emptied and she stood alone with grease on her wrist and a replacement bracket in her palm. Opinion or hands? I asked. Her tired eyes lifted. Hands, please. We worked until midnight with Professor Ivers checking calculations and 2 technicians handling the heavier pieces. Alina did not collapse into apology. I did not turn competent support into emotional absolution. We fixed the mechanism because the work mattered. Near 1 a.m, when the reed moved properly through its cycle, Alina sat on the floor and laughed once in disbelief. I thought my mother would be right, she said. About the bracket? About public failure being fatal. I sat a careful distance away. It looked survivable from here. She turned the greasy bracket over in her hands. I used to think if people saw the wrong thing became all of me. And now? Now I think hiding the wrong thing gave it more power than showing it. The sentence settled beside all the others she had earned slowly. I reached into my bag and pulled out a protein bar, the kind she used to force on me during long nights. Eat before you become unbearable, I said. Her face changed at the callback, pain and fondness crossing like weather. You kept one? I bought one. Don't look so triumphant. I wouldn't dare. She took it and opened the wrapper. We sat on the gallery floor under emergency work lights, eating terrible protein and watching her repaired steel reeds breathe in rhythm. It was not romantic in the obvious way. It was better. It was 2 artists, exhausted and imperfect, staying with the work after the performance failed. It made me trust her more than any apology had. The Courtlight exhibition opened 2 weeks later. By then, campus had settled into a new discomfort. Alina and I were no longer a secret, not exactly, but we were not a couple anyone could define. Nomi and I had become friends with honest edges. She filmed my installation process, and occasionally teased me for looking like a tragic heroine whenever Alina entered a room. Talia kept her distance. Liora Reyes donated nothing new, which Professor Ivers described as politically meaningful restraint. My piece grew into something larger than the heartbreak that had altered it. Suspended glass panels over a shallow black court, each one etched with patterns taken from stress fractures, arranged so that when viewers walked around it, broken lines became navigational maps. I called it drift study, though privately I thought of it as learning to hold steady. Opening night filled the old athletic hall with donors, critics, students, and the kind of expensive perfume that made the air feel upholstered. I wore a dark green dress borrowed from Nomi, who had said, "You need something that says I might accept your grant, but I will not thank you for discovering me." Alina arrived late, not for drama, but because she had been in a meeting with the Institute board. She wore black, simple and severe, with no jewelry except a thin silver ring I recognized from the night she had first held my hand under a cafe table and traced circles into my palm, until I stopped shaking about a failed critique. She did not come to me immediately. She greeted professors, donors, Lenora. She did her public life without making me chase a private version. Then the board chair, a man named Halvern, with a voice like polished wood, took the small stage to announce the showcase selection. My piece received the Graduate Installation Award. For one impossible second, I heard nothing after my name. Nomi whooped from somewhere near the back, entirely inappropriately. Professor Ivers smiled. Alina stood near the stage stairs, looking at me like she had known, and still felt wonder. I walked up, accepted the certificate, and gave the shortest speech of my life because long speeches made me nervous, and because the work had done most of my talking. This piece is about the difference between being held down and being held up, I said, my fingers tight around the paper. I'm grateful to everyone who helped me learn that difference. When applause ended, Halvern cleared his throat. And now, a note from our student liaison regarding committee procedure. I had not known Alina would speak. She climbed the stairs with no notes. A ripple moved through the room. She waited until it settled. Before selection began, I withdrew from the liaison role because my personal conduct had compromised trust with another artist in this cohort, she said. Her voice carried clearly across the room. The committee accepted that withdrawal. I want it recorded publicly because institutions often benefit from private harm staying private. I harmed someone by treating her as invisible, when honesty would have cost me less than silence cost her. She earned this award through her work. Not through association with me, not through scandal, not through anyone's protection. Her gaze found mine only briefly, then moved on, refusing to make the speech a plea. Saint Orla asks artists to make vulnerability visible. We should not punish them when they do. The cost arrived instantly. Halvern's smile stiffened. Lenora's expression became winter. Donors whispered. Alina had not just confessed to loving me, she had criticized the culture that protected people like her. She stepped down from the stage without looking triumphant. I stood near my installation, award certificate in hand, and understood that bravery was not always a grand romantic gesture. Sometimes it was choosing to become less comfortable in the system built to keep you comfortable. Sometimes it was refusing to let the person you loved become the explanation for your own integrity. I found her on the old training court after the crowd thinned. Not the exhibition platform, but Court 3, the real one where she had first taught me to hold a forehand while everyone pretended not to watch. The lights were dimmed. The nets cast long shadows. She stood near the baseline in her black dress, shoes in one hand, looking at the white line as if it might answer a question. "Are you hiding?" I asked from the doorway. She turned. "Resting." "From the consequences?" "From my mother's face." "Understandable." I walked to the bench and sat, careful with the borrowed dress. For a while we watched the empty court. Then she said, "I didn't do it to win you back tonight." "I know. I wanted to." Her honesty made me smile faintly. "Also know that." She sat beside me, leaving space. "Did it make things worse for you?" "Maybe socially, not inside." She looked at me then. The old pull was still there, but it had changed shape. Less hunger, more recognition. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Do you want me to keep trying from a distance, or do you want me to stop?" There was the door, open at last in the right direction. No pressure disguised as romance. No jealousy disguised as devotion. I thought of the hallway, the court, Nomi under the warehouse awning, Lenora in the library, my glass fractures turning into maps. "I want you to keep trying," I said. Her lashes lowered once, like relief had weight. "But not from a distance forever." She looked at me carefully. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not ready to fall back into your arms, because you finally became honest. But I am ready to let you walk beside me and see what consistency feels like." A laugh broke from her, small and wet around the edges. "I can do beside." "Can you?" I'm going to learn. I leaned back against the bench and stretched one foot over the painted sideline. You once told me I was performing confidence. That was rude of me. It was accurate, which was worse. She looked at the racket bag near her feet. You learned to hit. Not alone. No, she said, but you learned the difference between needing support and surrendering your agency. I looked at her. You have been listening. Obsessively, but I'm making it productive. I nudged her ankle with the toe of my shoe. Careful. That almost sounded like a joke. I contain multitudes. We did not kiss that night. I wanted to, which was exactly why I did not. Want had never been the problem. The problem had been letting Want vote on matters Trust had not approved. Instead, Alina walked me to the tram in front of the remaining exhibition guests. No hand at my back. No secret shortcut through service corridors. At the platform, Nomi appeared with her camera bag and 2 paper cups of tea. She took one look at us and smiled, a little sad and mostly kind. Am I interrupting a cinematic reconciliation? No, I said. A cautious infrastructure meeting. Sexy! Alina surprised me by laughing. Nomi handed me 1 cup, then offered the other to Alina. For the record, she said to her, I still think Liora is very dateable. Alina accepted the tea with dignity. That record is accurate. Nomi looked at me. And you? I knew what she was asking under the joke. I stepped closer and hugged her with one arm, tea between us. Thank you for seeing me when I needed to remember I could be seen. She squeezed me back. Don't make that sound like a consolation prize. It isn't. Good. She pulled away, eyes bright but steady. I'm going to flirt with a ceramicist now. She makes bowls that look emotionally unavailable. I laughed. Alina watched her go with an expression that held gratitude and discomfort in equal measure. She's remarkable, she said. Yes. In another life? I considered lying to spare her, then chose the new rules. Maybe. Alina absorbed that. Then I'm lucky. This is this life. The weeks after the exhibition did not turn us into an easy couple. That would have been too simple, and simplicity had never been our medium. We moved slowly, publicly, deliberately. We went to a faculty dinner and sat beside each other without touching until dessert. When Alina asked, "Can I hold your hand?" And I said yes, because she asked where people could hear. We worked in the studio without using work as an excuse to avoid emotional repair. She went to counseling through the Institute because, in her words, my fear has excellent tailoring and no moral compass. I told her that sounded like something she had rehearsed. She admitted it was, then said the unrehearsed version. I don't want to become my mother in prettier lighting. I learned things too. I learned that boundaries were not walls built to punish someone. They were doors with handles on my side. I learned that forgiveness was not a mood I could enter because someone looked sorry. It was a pattern I might choose after enough evidence. I learned that being desired by more than one woman did not require me to become cruel or indecisive. Desire was information, not obligation. Nomi remained in my life, first as a friend, then as collaborator on a short film about the exhibition. She found her ceramicist, whose bowls were apparently more emotionally available than advertised. When she introduced us, Alina shook the woman's hand with solemn respect, and later whispered, I'm glad she found someone with functional tableware. I nearly spilled wine laughing. Alina's public life changed in uneven ways. Some friends drifted because they preferred her polished and unavailable. Bryn adapted fastest, mostly because drama bored them once it required moral effort. Talia apologized months later in the material library, stiff and embarrassed. I was cruel because I liked being close to power, she said, and because I thought if you mattered, I mattered less. I respected the honesty, more than the apology. Alina did not force reconciliation between us. She understood by then that not every repaired thing had to become intimate. Sometimes repair meant a clean ending. By winter, Drift Study had been invited to a regional show, and Alina had begun building a new piece using counterweights that responded to touch without collapsing into dependency. She claimed it was not about us. I told her all artists were liars with better lighting. The night before shipping my installation, we returned to the court one last time, Because the Institute was closing that wing for renovation. Snow tapped softly against the skylights. Work lamps glowed against the polished surface. I stood at the baseline in rolled-up sleeves, nervous in a way that felt almost nostalgic. "Are you going to offer to teach me tennis again?" I asked. Alina stood across from me with a basket of balls at her feet. "Only if you ask." That answer settled in me like warmth. I picked up my racket. It was mine now, not borrowed from a clinic closet, not handed to me while I stood humiliated in someone else's story. The grip tape was new and slightly too bright, because Nomi had chosen it as a joke, and because I had decided not all evidence of being seen had to be subtle. "Alina," I said, "will you help me with my grip?" Her face changed, open and unguarded. Yes. This time, when I turned my back, I did not feel like I was surrendering. I felt like I was choosing evidence. Her hands came to mine only after I nodded. She adjusted my fingers around the handle, then touched my waist lightly enough that I could step away without effort. "Tell me when to let go," she said. "Not yet." She guided my shoulder through the motion once, then again. The third time, I felt the swing arrive from my legs instead of my fear. She eased her hands away before I hit the ball. For a second, I stood alone at the baseline. Not abandoned, not hidden, alone in the way a person is alone inside her own strength. Then I swung. The ball met the center of the strings with a clean, bright sound and crossed the net into the square of winter light. I turned around, and Alina was smiling before she could decide whether smiling made her vulnerable. I reached back, and she took my hand. Not my waist. My hand. I laughed, and the sound came easily. Alina laughed too, quiet and astonished, as if joy still surprised her when it did not require permission from anyone outside the room. Later, in our coats at the court doors, she kissed me with the care of someone who no longer mistook secrecy for safety. When we left, we walked through the front doors of Saint Orla together, under the renovated archway where anyone could have seen us. Snow had softened the courtyard. My reflection moved beside hers in the dark glass, separate and joined, no longer something hidden between closing doors. At the gate, Alina squeezed my hand once and waited for me to squeeze back. I did. Then we stepped into the winter street, not performing trust, not playing a part, simply walking forward in the open.